The Hatherleigh Behavioral Health Podcast brings mental health professionals together through insightful, expert-led conversations each month. Designed to foster connection, collaboration, and continuing education, this podcast explores emerging trends in behavioral health, spotlights innovative practices, and elevates voices across the mental health community. Each episode features thought-provoking discussions with leading clinicians, researchers, and educators, along with listener Q&A, practical takeaways, and updates on new learning resources from Hatherleigh. Our guest today is Dr. Carrie Johansson. She is a psychologist and an author of Self-Help on the Go. Before we begin and introduce her more, I'm going to start with a few statistics. So an APA survey found that 89% of U.S. adults feel stressed during the holidays. That's almost 90% of people, with 41% reporting higher stress levels than usual. Another survey found that 80% of Americans feel stressed by holiday expectations and events. There's an increase in anxiety and depression. 60% of Americans experience increased anxiety, and 52% experience increased depression. Nearly 3 in 10 Americans report getting less sleep during the holidays. Some causes of this stress: financial strain, family dynamics, grief and loneliness, and unrealistic expectations. Holidays can also worsen already existing mental health issues. Approximately 64% of people with a mental illness report that the holidays make their condition worse. And they report negative emotions, including irritability, sadness, and fatigue. And unfortunately, women have higher levels of stress than men. And younger adults, ages 18 to 34, are particularly worried about affording gifts for the holidays. So our big goal here today and question is, how do we bring back the joy, not only to the holiday season, but winter and life in general? And I think Dr. Johansson's book, Self-Help, and my book, Swedish Lagom and the Philosophy of Lagom, is the answer, and that's what's going to help. So before we get too much into it, Dr. Johansson, could you please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you and what motivated you to write this book?
Absolutely. So I've been a psychologist and in private practice for the last 24 years. And my clients were coming to me very generously, handing me books and saying, here, I'm going to let you give this to another client because I don't need 300 pages on why I'm getting angry. I just need to know what to do the next time my boss is a jerk. And so Self-Help on the Go is the book that I wrote in response to my clients' requests. It has 10 chapters with the majority of common problems that we all face. And in each chapter is 10 tips, most of which you can apply immediately. So if you're having a communication difficulty, turn to the chapter on communication, thumb through the tips, and quickly decide, like, oh, I'm going to try this one right now. And then you give it a try. And it's all based on a foundation of philosophy that I think really overlaps so nicely with Lagom, and that is psychological flexibility. So let's work with the reality we have, and let's settle down and not expect ourselves to be perfect and not expect life to go perfectly. Instead, to work with and expect life's inevitable ups and downs. And then it's not a character deficit when you're having a bad day. It's just a more challenging season or a busier day or a more difficult day. And giving yourself simple tips and practices to try to field those difficult days is a nice way to move forward. And I particularly loved the notion of Lagom. I became instantly Swedish. We were talking about this. I became instantly Swedish when I married my husband and about 4 years ago. And there's been some aspects to Swedish culture that I think are just absolutely phenomenal. But one of the most interesting to me was this notion of balance and just having enough and simple connection rituals. So I'm excited to talk about that today.
As am I. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Lagom, it basically translates to just enough. And it's about finding balance in all areas of your life, whether that's your life-work balance, relationships, connections with others, alone time, eating, exercising, home decor, your environment. It's all about that balance. And as we know, as clinicians and even individuals, balance is what, grounds us, and it's what helps us, foster resilience, and it helps with burnout. And we always have to find that balance in life. And I think what's great about Lagom too is that it's, you don't have to be Swedish to practice it,
No.
but it's about, finding what works for you. And I think that's why with your self-help on the go, anybody can relate to it. And for Lagom, everybody's just enough is different. So
Yes.
a lot of times, people think, my grandmother always had the saying, my mama, it is what it is. And sometimes people think, oh, that's kind of, like a depressing way of looking at it. Like you can't do things to fix it. And it's quite the opposite. It's accepting things and finding what works for you, and then kind of creating this plan on, okay, how are we going to make the best of it? We know that Sweden and other Scandinavian and Nordic countries are always rated as the happiest countries in the world. And if you're a Swede, you kind of find that funny, or if you know Swedish people, because you're not, when you think of happy people, you don't always think
You're
of
not a,
Swedish, right,
no.
boisterous kind of person that's always laughing and talking. Much the opposite. We're pretty reserved. But that happiness is that contentment. It's that purpose in life. It's the intention in life. And I think that's what we get from Lagom and the self-help, tactics that you describe. I was reading another statistic that 73% of people wish they had more time for self-help and self-care.
Yeah.
And so I guess, our goal here too is how do we get people invested and encouraged in doing some of these self-care and finding that balance? And Dr. Johansson, what are some of your kind of go-to tips right now for everybody's well-being, but especially around the holidays?
Well, I think one of the first things that I encourage people to do is to move away from all or nothing judgment. So our brains tend to do this automatically. Things get dropped into it's the same means it's safe, means it's okay. It's different or it's new. That means it's dangerous. And that's a problem. And we do a lot better in terms of feeling, again, life's inevitable ups and downs and the inevitable, fairly predictable stressors around the holidays when we slow down and instead of labeling everything as good or bad, or I'm good or bad, or I'm doing well or poorly, I hate this, I love that, is to soften into what I refer to as assessment instead of judgment. So slow down and take, and any of the things we're going to talk about today should only take a little bit of time, right? This is not fancy self-help where you need a $10,000 program or a guru or a retreat for a month. Like literally, this is about slowing down and taking 2 minutes at the start to your day and doing an assessment. How does my day look? What's realistic today? What's working well? What isn't working well? So, very different than starting your day with, I'm so busy and I hate this and this is going to be so hard, right? All of those are both judgments and they're also a pattern of thinking that's going to keep you in that stuck, difficult, upset. And when you can slow down and just take a look and look realistically, right? I did this for myself this morning. I was planning on making dinner for a friend tonight at about 6:30. I was traveling. I haven't gone to the grocery store yet. I'm at work all day until 6. How realistic is it for me to make dinner tonight? Like 0%. So relaxing into like, oh, let's look at our day, what's really workable, what's less workable, and to just soften into an assessment and soften out of some of that judgment would be one of the places that I would encourage you to start.
hmm And I think you're right with, finding that balance. And we live in a world of extremes, like you said,
Yeah.
like all or nothing. And that's really a cognitive distortion. And that's not where we want to be living. We want that, middle ground. And
Hmm.
I think starting your day, so the Swedish way of living, right, is getting up early and being an early
Yeah.
riser. And it gives you that moment of calm, before the whole day gets busy. It gives you that moment to just be with yourself, to plan out the day. Swedes love to plan. And
Mhm.
realize, okay, what can I get done? What needs to wait for tomorrow? Because then you have more, realistic expectations,
Yeah.
kind of manageable goals. And then that in turn is going to make you feel better, throughout the day. And I have
Yep.
a lot of clients too that, oh, I have so much to do before the holidays. I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to meet with this person, I have wrapping. And yes, that's true. But what is your end goal in that?
Hmm.
Why do we do all of these things? And yes, certain things will be stressful. But I like to say, and Swedish Lagom is also about finding joy in just enough. But it's like,
Yeah.
how do you find that joy even in the stressful times and in what you're doing? And I think a lot of that goes back to, right, cognitive behavioral therapy and the, optimistic, positive thinking. But that question is like, okay, if I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, one, why am I doing it?
Uh-huh.
Or how do I enjoy this moment, no matter what it is?
I've been talking a ton in the last couple of weeks. This came up in one of my masterminds, the notion that, and I unfortunately don't have a good citation here, like I don't know who originated this quote, but we were talking about how a complaint is just a poorly worded request.
Mm.
And we spent really the bulk of our mastermind hour on that concept. And then I was taking another friend's class, and she was talking about complaints, desires, and actions and making it into a three-column situation. But I think if we can start by taking a look at the complaints that we're making with ourselves, what's the request behind the complaint? And so if we're constantly complaining we don't have enough time, that probably points to secretly, it points to that you need to slow down and reprioritize.
Mhm.
And for the person who's like, but how can I reprioritize when I have my kids thing and I'm supposed to make 2,000 Christmas cookies and it's like, okay, first, take a breath. Let's get ahead of the emotions
Mhm.
instead of having the emotions be dragging us around, particularly in the holiday season. Let's get ahead of the emotions and slow down and take a look. All right, I have to make Christmas cookies. My child has a concert. I still need to get presents. How can you simplify and get back into the overarching values, right? What's the goal of the season is to enjoy connection.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that the present has to be $2,000. A $20 present could make a difference. A $2 present could make a difference. But to slow down and settle down and take a look at what's going on and then plan accordingly instead of being in reaction mode all the time, I think is super important.
Mhm.
One of my favorite quotes from your book was the notion of there's no bad weather, only inappropriate clothing. And when my husband's Swedish cousins came to visit us from Sweden, they were wonderful. And I was attempting to learn Swedish and I was quite terrible at it, but it was really fun to try. Um, one of the things that they were talking about was that exact concept. So I thought it was so fun, right? Like the Swedes in my house said the exact thing. And I think in general, if you take that metaphor and turn it into something larger, there's no bad weather, only inappropriate clothing. There's actually typically the patterns that we end up in, even if they're patterns of stress, are patterns that we can probably predict.
Mhm.
Right? Your Uncle Harry, who's going to talk about politics at the dinner table, he's going to talk about politics at the dinner table. It's a part of who he is. And
Mhm.
trying to control someone, it doesn't tend to work very well. But being prepared, oh, Harry, there you go, talking about politics again. I don't, that's not something I want to talk about at Christmas dinner, but thanks.
Right. And it's about, like you said, how you react and that philosophy, right, of, no such thing as bad clothing or not, no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing really sets the tone of, okay, how do we make how do we prepare for a situation, like you said, and also how do we make the best of it? And I
Right.
think that's what Swedes, are kind of known for and why they're considered, one of the happiest, countries
Yeah.
in the world. And it's somewhat ironic because, Sweden endures very harsh, cold, dark
Very.
winters.
Hmm.
And instead of fighting against it, they embrace it.
Hmm.
So, and I think more people are familiar with the popular Danish concept of hygge, but
Yeah.
Swedes have it called mys.
Meese.
And again, it's that cozy contentment that you're creating yourself.
Yeah.
Even though, and growing up, I actually, this is very un-Swedish of me, but I did not like winter. I didn't like that you had to prepare to go outside. All the clothes were like bulky. I just
Uh-huh.
was not a fan. But then I realized, okay, I live in New Hampshire. Winters
You're
are
gonna
very
have
hot.
winter.
If I wanted to, I could move, but I'm choosing not to. So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, how do I make the best of this? Because I don't want to feel like I'm dreading winter or that I don't want winter. So it was, right, you make your indoor environment. And
Yeah.
growing up, our indoor environment was always very cozy, candle lit. Like we never had bright lights on. It was always warm, like very cozy. But also embracing the outdoors where, okay, if you have appropriate clothing, it does make a difference. And, having an outdoor fire, going for a snowshoe,
Yep.
all those things that maybe you don't love at first and you could, view it as stressful or I don't like this. But then you think, okay, but I don't want to be miserable. So how am I going to lean in to
Uh-huh.
these, situations and make the best of it? And it was similar to what you were saying when I started writing Swedish Lagom with my mom. It was really because what I found in my private practice was I was encouraging clients, how to live in different like daily living skills and habits.
Hmm.
And it was the Swedish way of living.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, and there were a lot of aha moments like, oh, if everybody did this, I feel like people would have overall better, mental health. So it's really
Well, and
encouraging people to live
yeah.
the Swedish way.
And here's a really interesting tip. We do not, I think particularly in American culture, we've become quite obsessed with feeling comfortable. And also we're outsourcing our comfort. So I'm only comfortable if you agree with me. It's
Mm,
your job to make me feel comfortable. Oh my gosh. If you can drop one thing this holiday season and give yourself a great big present, drop that approach to the world.
mm,
It does not work. And we grow, we do the best. We actually blossom as human beings when we let ourselves feel a little bit uncomfortable.
mm.
Not dangerously uncomfortable, but a little bit uncomfortable. So that notion of like winter isn't your favorite and you go out snowshoeing anyway. And I bet when you come back inside, particularly to a well-curated, cozy environment, which I hope looks like our backgrounds, right? Um, don't you feel better? Both about yourself, you feel better in your body, like it's an embodied experience, and mentally. And then you can actually enjoy that cozy environment that you've set up all the more.
Right, exactly. And I think that, like you said, it's okay to feel uncomfortable. Swedes and Nordic people do the morning plunge, right, in the ice cold
Yep.
water. Not very comfortable in the moment, but they realize the, benefits of it, later on.
Yep.
And again, it's that you don't have to be happy all the time, but you're content and you
Content.
understand, there's a reason behind it, purpose, and you make the best of it. And I think that's, the main difference between maybe what we as Americans consider happiness and what the
Yep.
Nordic, countries consider happiness. But I
Absolutely.
would love to get into some of your tactics because, like Swedish Lagom Living, they're very manageable, doable. Anyone can do these self-help
Yep.
strategies.
They're not
And-
expensive.
right. And it can be done, very easily on a day-to-day ritual. So the first one I would want to talk about, it was the daily rituals really make a difference.
Yeah.
And I always say it's the little things in life that have the biggest impact.
Yep. What are some of your favorites?
Getting up early.
Mhm.
The Swedish have a ritual called Fika, and it
Oh, I love Fika.
translates roughly to like a coffee break. but it's so much more than a coffee break.
Hmm.
Um, Growing up, when we would visit my grandparents, my grandpa would be outside doing something, my grandma would usually be in the house, and then they always come in together and have coffee and usually like a sweet treat. And growing up, they didn't say, we're fikaing or it's fika. They just did it. And growing up, I always thought, I didn't know what it was. I just thought they really liked coffee and sweets. Like I had no idea this was actually like a practice. And then learning more about it, Fika is really a daily habit of, stopping, having an intentional pause, being mindful and kind of resetting. So you can,
Yes.
Fika by yourself, you can Fika with other people.
Hmm.
But in Sweden, even big companies like Volvo will stop
Yep.
throughout the day so the workers can have this reset and this connection. And it's a really nice pause, throughout the day.
And it's slow,
Hmm.
right? Most of the time, I do some consulting for businesses, and particularly in the US, people talk about, I'm going to run to the bathroom. And then they bring their phones to the bathroom.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to run to the bathroom. Oh, I'm going to take a quick break. And it's with that tone of voice too. I'm going to take a quick break. It doesn't really sound like a break. It doesn't really sound like relaxation. One of the joys of Fika is
Right.
it's actually calm. It is, from a psychology standpoint, it's a neurosystem reset.
Mhm.
And it's a little treat, not a binge, right? It's a little treat, typically with friends. It's slower, and you actually drop the work.
Right.
And then you return to the work. And this is one of the things that I think is so important for us. We are actually wave functions, and life is actually a wave function. We're supposed to be like this. We aren't supposed to start low, go high, and endlessly be up here. And we're also not supposed to be purposely putting ourselves in very high and very low, right? Environments and experiences. Now we'll have those sometimes, but something like Fika takes a wave function, which naturally our energy dips in the afternoon, and you give yourself a little sweet treat and it goes back up,
Mm.
right? And so it's working with your rhythms and letting yourself have a rhythm that I think is so important. And a rhythm is not push, 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 collapse.
Right.
It's push, push, give yourself some challenge and then relax and relax on purpose.
Hmm.
And that can look as simple as sitting in your chair, closing your eyes. That activates evolutionary biology, right? If we're safe enough to take down a whole sensory system, our internal environment goes, oh, we must be pretty safe, right? Not looking for tigers over my shoulder. Close your eyes and breathe on purpose. And flop in your chair, relax in your chair. Tell your whole nervous system, even if you only set your cell phone alarm for 2 minutes, tell your whole nervous system for 2 whole minutes that you're safe, you're okay, you're taking a break, you're taking a rest. And then re engage. Very different than push, 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 push until you collapse.
Right. And I think there's simple things like always. So Swedish people also have a thing where we have a lot of mugs. We love mugs,
Uh-huh.
probably because of Fika. But little things like that, getting
Yep.
a new mug or
Have
a
a
cozy
favorite.
mug is
Mhm.
going to enhance that experience too. And they're very simple little things. In my book too, I talk about if for whatever reason you can't have Fika at a certain time or your schedule doesn't allow it, you can do things throughout the day. And if you have a family, we always had when we would come home from school, we would have like our Fika. So we would sit around
Yep.
the kitchen table. My mom and dad would have like snacks for us and we would talk about our day.
Yep.
And if that's not feasible, then maybe it's a car ride somewhere
Uh-huh.
or, right before bed. But again, it's that it doesn't matter so much, when it is, and you don't have to do it exactly, the Swedish way. But
Mhm.
it's that what works for your family and yourself and finding those times throughout the day to connect. And again, it's a daily connection,
Yes.
which I think is very important. You also have a whole chapter called Feel Happier Today, which I love. And you
Yep.
have something called the 20% solution. Could you
Oh
explain
my
that?
gosh. This was awesome. So years ago, I was taking a time management course, and I realized that the person who is teaching the time management course, he and I had almost nothing in common. Um, and so some of his tips weren't very realistic. Like he had a 2-hour morning routine. He then, only worked about 5 to 6 hours a day. He lived in a supported building in New York, so that literally his groceries were delivered. Like he just had a very different life. Not better or worse necessarily, but I was at a stage in my life where if I even so much as opened an eyeball, even the cat would be like, "You're up and you can meet my needs," right? Like, I definitely wasn't going to have, 200 minutes in the morning. But there was a suggestion that he made that I thought was phenomenal, which was take out 20%. Take a look, and most of the time, you can take out 20%. And 20% of stuff, 20% of clutter, but then it got even better. 20% of obligations.
Mhm.
And one of the things that my friend and I were talking about as I was introducing this concept to her, she was like, I'm going to take out 20% of the negative stories I've been telling. And so just that notion of, again, softly, right? Not with a ton of rigidity or, I have to do it this way, but softly take a look around. Where's 20% of obligations that you could probably say no thank you to moving forward? Where's 20%? Could you clean up 20% of your closet so you don't have hanging over your head every time you get dressed? Do I like this or do I not like this? Right? Does this fit? Oh, this doesn't fit. And then you feel bad for the rest of the day, right? Instead, it's like, hey, this doesn't fit. I'm going to give myself permission to either pack this up or let it go. But to narrow things by 20% gives you an amazing amount of freedom,
Mm-hmm.
but
And very
particularly that internal, right?
right. And very Lagom, like you said, with the decluttering,
Yep.
and it's a minimalistic type of lifestyle because it will
Yep.
help, what's the phrase? A cluttered room is a cluttered brain,
Mind. Yep.
mind, right? Which is true. But again, I want to emphasize it can be different for everyone. It's not like we're telling everyone to get rid of everything and only have one
No.
shirt or one, right? And I think that's what sometimes people think of. And even when we say, you say no to certain obligations,
Mhm.
it's only if it's stressing you out. Like I
Right.
love to party plan and I love going all out for holidays and decorations, which isn't, well, they're all Swedish decorations, but
Yeah.
that brings me joy. If it
Uh-huh.
were stressing me out, then I would, try to think, okay, yeah, what is this 20% solution? Where can I cut things? Because
Yep.
it's not working for me. So again,
Mhm.
I don't want people to think that like you have to get rid of all of your possessions or traditions to be happier. It's just
No.
finding what works and finding that balance.
Yep.
You also
Absolutely.
have another, the Pursuit of Happiness survey. So what makes people happy? And I think some of us, know this, getting outside, enjoying
Yep.
beauty. And we talk about,
Yep.
those awe experiences.
Yes.
Um, the successes or accomplishments, which is kind of like your purpose, the simple pleasures, but then also connecting with loved ones. And I
Yes.
know during the holidays, that can be a stressor for people if they are feeling lonely, if they are grieving, if they don't have a family to necessarily celebrate with. And, if you have any, self-care tips for them, because I know with Lagom, people say, well, I don't have a family, I can't make traditions, or I can't, do this or that. And I always encourage them that, you can still have, like the Fika with yourself. You can have the Mies nights, for
Yep.
yourself and the
Yep.
self-care individually, but also finding opportunities to connect with other people. So in the Swedish culture, there's a thing called Jantelagen, and it's basically about like community involvement and giving back.
Hmm.
So maybe that becomes your family. If you don't have
Yep.
a big Christmas Eve celebration to go to, maybe you volunteer somewhere, or maybe you have a support group. But I know, holidays can be harder and more difficult for people who don't have that built-in family connection.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's worth taking a look around at your world, right? And where can you create some connection? What class could you join? Could you go to the rec center? If you are an older person, most rec centers are actually free in the US through silver sneakers, right? And that's typically through folks' health insurance and things like that. Um, and so there's small ways to figure out increased connection. But I think one of the most valuable is that notion of volunteering. So it's interesting if you take a look at some of the research on depression treatments that are non-medical. The
Mhm.
top one, overarchingly, every single time for the last several decades, is exercise. About 20 minutes, about 4 days a week. It outperforms every antidepressant on the market,
Mhm.
right? This should give the pharmaceutical companies some serious pause. Now, I'm not anti-medication. I'm not saying go off your meds. I'm not saying if you think you need meds, don't take them. None of those things. Use medication if that is right for you. However, there's a couple of non-medication related treatments for depression. First one is exercise. The second one, the second most effective, is volunteering.
Mm.
So going and giving back, doing something that is outside of yourself. One of the things about depressive thoughts is they tend to be incredibly self-focused and also self-focused in a way that makes you more and more distant from other people. So if you find yourself in a pattern of thinking where it's like, oh, well, no one likes me. Okay, let's slow down. Let's do an assessment. How are you coming across? Where are you trying to connect? Are
Mhm.
you trying to connect by forcing other people to think just like you? That's definitely going to be disconnective. So, but that notion of getting involved, getting into a family of choice, maybe if your family is either far away or deceased or difficult, right? Creating a family of choice for yourself and a piece of that. One of the easiest ways to figure that out is through a volunteer organization.
Mm. Now, speaking of family, you said you married into a Swedish family.
I did.
So for the audience and people who aren't Swedish, going from non-Swedish to Swedish, what would you say have been some of the more beneficial, practices, ways of living, philosophies, or any specific things that you think even non-Swedes would really appreciate?
I mean, I think for me, there's a lot of overlap. I love to host. I love to cook. And so and I love to make a cozy home. So some of that was just easy overlap. I think one of the things that I find most delightful is my, like serious, very smart husband is like a child around Fika. And he literally does it like this. He's like, Fika, 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 right? And it's marvelous. It brings out his inner 5-year-old. And for him, he remembers being able, he lived in Sweden as a kiddo for a little while and then has gone back as an adult. And and it's just pure delight, right? It's this notion of it's delightful to stop and have a cup of coffee and have a sweet treat. And it's delightful.
Mhm.
And just that playful joy, I think is just marvelous.
Mm.
So
I think
that's been one of the things I really like.
part two is like you said, he looks forward to Fika and he had it ever since he was younger. And it's those traditions, I
Yep.
think, that really help us feel, connected to people, to our families. It helps us, like I said before, with resilience, with
Yeah.
confidence, with support. And I'm sure other cultures do it too, but I feel like in the Scandinavian culture, there's so many traditions,
Mhm.
especially around the holidays, that help people feel connected.
Yep.
And some people might not know this, but if you do look at our backgrounds, everything in our background is Swedish and it has some purpose and meaning. And
And do you want to talk a little bit about some of them?
I remember growing up, we would have a Swedish Christmas tree that looked just like the one behind us. And in my head, it was just those are our Christmas ornaments,
Uh-huh.
ever since we were little. And I'd go to friends' houses and they would have like tinsel and colored lights and all these like flashy things. And I was like, oh, how come
I'm
we can't
missing
have
out.
that?
Yeah.
And colored lights were a big, like, no, we can never have colored lights. But then the older I got and I got to realize that the Christmas tree kind of like tells a family story, and every
Mhm.
ornament, has a purpose. And again, it's supposed to be that simple decor is not meant to overwhelm you. Again, if it's a
Right.
preference, that's fine. You can like colored lights and tinsel and be very happy, but it's not meant to overwhelm you.
Mm-hmm.
It's help, that environment helps you pause again, take deep breaths, and relax a little. So if you're looking at something that doesn't give you that feeling, that's something we want to change. The Christmas goat, the Yule goat, was before Santa would bring presents. The Yule goat would bring presents. So
I
we
don't think I knew
the
about this.
straw
I knew
goat.
about the Krampus, which sounds like the opposite of enjoyable.
Yes. The other thing too, so my mom is Swedish, but growing up, and again, this is why Lagom can be for anybody, and you can kind of pick and choose what you want to, incorporate into your family. So
Hmm.
we didn't do all the Swedish traditions. St. Lucia Day is very big for us.
Yeah.
The lights, the candles. But it's funny, my mom doesn't like hearts. And the
Oh.
heart is a huge Swedish symbol. So again, it's just picking what you want, what makes you feel good in that moment and finding joy, in the simple things and what makes you feel joy. It's not expectations for anybody else but yourself.
Mhm.
You also have a chapter that often life happens because we created it. And I
Yes.
love this because I'll tell you a little story. So I do ecotherapy with a very, very small school. And we
Okay.
take the kids out in the woods. And every week we do like a food tasting to help with, flexible thinking and trying new things.
Yep.
And last week I brought them pepperkaka cookies, which is basically like a Swedish ginger snap, but a little less gingery.
Hmm.
And the tradition is that you put it in your palm and you make a wish and you tap it. And if it taps in three pieces, your wish comes true.
Hmm.
So I shared
Yeah,
this.
they're a little thinner. They're
Right.
yummy.
So I share this with my students and they tapped it. And some of them have autism, have some dyslexia. So
Yeah.
they have a hard time sometimes with flexible thinking.
Yeah.
So in my head, I was like, oh, I might have created something very terrible here
Uh-huh.
if they don't do it in three pieces. And they all cracked in four. And this one little girl goes, oh, four makes me even luckier. And I was like, hey, it's a great way of looking at it. And
Oh,
then
I love this.
someone else cracked it and he said, oh, look, see, three. I did it myself. And I said, you know what, buddy? Sometimes we create our own luck and our own happiness. But it's things like that where it's like that mindset, you need to have
Yeah.
that you create the life that you want and the
Yes.
moments that you want, the connections, the coziness, and it will make a difference. Very simple things like turning your lights down, right? So you're not at that bright level that
Yeah.
your brain's not like on overload. Having fresh flowers in the house or having any kind of nature inside is a huge Scandinavian thing. And again, just allowing that time to find the balance between am I doing too much? Am I doing too little?
Hmm.
And am I enjoying this?
But it's still your responsibility, and that responsibility actually is exciting because if you're looking around your life and realizing, things aren't going in the direction I want to go, again, you're the pivot point for your life. So you can actually pivot. And sometimes that may mean changing your community. Sometimes it like huge changes, right? It might mean moving or changing your community or changing jobs, something like that. Sometimes it could mean something just as simple as I'm not very nice to myself. And so I'm going to slow down and starting today, not tomorrow, right? When do most habits start? Either Monday or tomorrow. Start it today. As you're leaving this podcast, whenever you get to hear it, what's one thing you could do today that would make your life, your thoughts, your connections a little cozier, a little softer, a little kinder?
Mhm.
We're not encouraging you to be lazy, right? We're encouraging you to be kind. And we're encouraging you to slow down and get more grounded and more balanced in your world. So when, we say oftentimes life happens because we've created it, that's what I'm talking about. We're the pivot point. If we've been putting up with a pattern for a long time that actually is unsatisfactory, we get to change it.
Mhm.
That's really cool.
Right. And it similar to the practice of gratitude. So again,
Sure.
right, it's kind of accepting what you have,
Yep.
enjoying what you have, being thankful for what you have. And how do you
And
feel like that changes, our outlook on things and our stress levels?
yeah. So gratitude, I think, is incredibly important because it is also a part of that assessment, right? What's going well is a part of what we need to be asking ourselves.
Mm.
And then what isn't working so well, and what do I want to do about it? Right? Again, if we take those three columns, what's the complaint? What's the desire? And then what's the action that you're going to take to get a little closer?
Mhm.
So just enough, just enough assessment.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Will you talk a little bit more about MEIS and
Sure.
what that looks like concretely for people? Because I feel like that is a really, um, again, inexpensive, not stressful way to, in small movements, really improve your world.
Mhm. Of course. So, like we said, Mies is that cozy, comfort, contentment feeling. And a lot of times we think of it more in the winter months, like a roaring fire, the dim
Cocoa.
candlelights, right? Sipping on hot cocoa or Swedish glug, wrapped up in a blanket. And it's, that came from having to endure the hard, harsh, cold winters and making the best of it. Mies can also be found in the summer too. I mean, it's just that cozy feeling. Um, and we have what we're called like cozy Fridays. So it's a big thing in Sweden that every Friday night, you either, watch a movie with your family, you cuddle up by yourself with a book, you enjoy some wine or some coffee by the fire, and it's
Yep.
for Dogsmees, which is a cozy Friday. And it's a weekly ritual, which again, it's that connection. It's something to look forward to throughout the week, and it helps kind of reset, your whole nervous system to
Yeah.
allowing yourself to find that comfort. And simple things you can do, like no harsh lighting, light a candle. There's actually research that looking at a flickering candle helps with like mindfulness.
Yep.
Uh, Little things like that. Buy a cozy blanket. And I know they are very simple things to do, but they will make a big difference.
Mhm.
Enjoy your environment. I always say you spend a lot of time at home. Make it somewhere you want to be.
Yeah.
And that could be with the decor. That could be with how you lay out your rooms, how much time, how much sunlight you get in, but make it enjoyable for you.
Mhm.
And I think some people think they don't have the time for that, but by doing so, when you come home from work, you're excited to come home. You have a nice, environment, and it doesn't have to be extravagant by any
Yep.
means. It can be
Have
very
you,
simple.
there's an entire book. I believe the title of the book is Make Your Bed,
Mm,
right? It's I believe it's written by a Navy guy.
yes.
And one of the things that he's talking about is that the concept of make your bed means that first of all, you're starting your morning with intention, which I think is beautiful and very much in concert with what we're talking about today. But second of all, it means that then when you come home from work, you're coming home to a sense of order.
Mhm.
Things are together. And that sense of order tends to then give our internal environment a little bit more order,
Right.
which then makes it easier for us to think and easier for us to react to the ups and downs of the day.
Hmm.
So it's so small, right? It's the opposite of extravagant. It takes approximately 35 seconds, right, to make your bed, unless you're really rigid on the hospital corners, which I'm not so good at. Um, and it just gives you those benefits. And so I think it's again, it's this notion of like, what are the small things you can be doing for yourself, especially right now, to increase order and increase cozy, lovely, comfy sort of feelings.
Right. So we're coming up almost on an hour. So if anybody does
Yeah.
have any remaining questions, feel free to put it in the chat. I'll end too with just certain things in the book. We have how to act like a Swede. So it's very typical of most Swedish people to respect personal space, take off your shoes.
Mhm.
That is a huge one. We never wear shoes in the house. Be punctual and environmentally aware. Don't be loud. Don't be overly familiar. And always leave the last piece of food. It's a strange Swedish thing, but if there's a plate of food, nobody will take the last piece unless it's been discussed who wants it, who needs it. It's just those little things that kind of help find, that balance in your overall life.
Absolutely. My number one reminder from reading the Lagom book, your Lagom book, was I had forgotten the joy of candles,
Mm,
and I am bringing that back out. So,
good. I have to say, when I talk to my clients about it, that is one of the first things that they buy. And you can buy, like the fake candles now too,
sure.
which work just as well. But
Yep.
they'll have candles, they'll put some flowers in the house, they'll try
Yep.
and get outside, and it does. We see an improvement in their overall well-being.
Yeah.
But Dr. Johansson, if you could give people wanting to, one piece of advice to kind of help de-stress this holiday season, where could they start? One simple thing.
Yeah, I think I would go back to what we were talking about in the very beginning, which is we want to work with the reality that we have instead of wishing for something to be different. And so to slow down, take a breath, figure out what's enjoyable in your world right now, even if it's small, and then take one small action towards the next thing that you would like to add in for yourself. So nothing giant, small steps, and give yourself some grace and some permission to change over time instead of insisting on everything change overnight.
Great advice. And we thank you so much for being here. And thank you
Thank you,
everyone for
Carrie.
listening. And I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday and that you guys can find joy in just enough this season.